Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Splatterhouse. Happy birthday to you. Hey everybody, Mazer here, and welcome back to another episode of Small Table. As you can tell from that little opening, today's topic is going to be one of my favorite franchises of all time, Splatterhouse. Yes! Today, November 23rd, 2020, is the 32nd anniversary of the day that Splatterhouse got released in arcades. It was a game that nobody had ever seen before during this time period, and it really shocked audiences, it shocked critics, and it was something of an instant hit because of its very mature and ultra-violent themes. To put things in perspective, in 1988, Nintendo was just releasing Mario 3, Ninja Gaiden, and Mega Man 2. So, to think that this kind of ultra-violent video game inspired by horror movies was... that's terrible. Hold on. Now, to put things in perspective, in 1988, Nintendo was releasing... To put things in perspective, in 1988, Nintendo released Mario 3, Capcom just released... Why did I just hesitate? Mega Man is Capcom. Why am I thinking it's not? To put things in perspective, Nintendo was Jesus, God, I was going on, I had a roll and now it's screwing me up. To put things in perspective, 1988 was the release of Nintendo's Mario 3, Capcom's Mega Man 2. So we had all these really cool, action, adventure platformers, but they were more or less very kid-friendly. You had bright colors and you had very heroic personas. And then Namco comes out and says, we're going to get rid of all that. We're going dark, we're going gritty, we're going super violent, and we're going to release Splatterhouse to the arcades. So what I want to do is basically discuss my personal enjoyment of this franchise before going into the game's storyline, what influenced the game, the violence that the game shows off, and basically discuss the 2010 reboot. So first and foremost, Splatterhouse was one of those games I never knew existed until probably my teens. When it came out in 1988, I was 5 years old, so I was not going to the arcades. I was, at home playing my NES. I didn't see Splatterhouse in the arcade until my teens, and right away it just sucked me in. I mean, I had no idea what the storyline was at the time. I just, threw a bunch of quarters in and started playing as this giant beast of a man with a hockey mask who was literally punching enemies' heads off and smashing them into walls, releasing gallons of blood and organs. And, teenage me was like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. And of course, because I skipped the storyline, I thought I was playing as Jason Voorhees. I was like, oh my God, a game where I'm the villain? I'm the slasher monster? How cool is that? Of course, it wasn't until much later where I discovered the storyline in its entirety, mostly thanks to the 2010 remake. And since then, I've been low-key obsessed about Splatterhouse. As you can see here, I have the terror mask from the 2010 Remake Special Edition. It is autographed by Jim Cummings himself, who voiced the terror mask. I also got this amazing photo rendering of Rick tearing apart all the demons of hell, autographed by Mr. Jim Cummings as well. And I use it a lot in my artwork. I made this t-shirt for Splatterhouse. This was the first shirt I made when I started making my own shirts. I was like, I just love this logo, this design. So when I was going to make a shirt, I was like, hey, it came with this glitter texture. Why not cut it out as the Splatterhouse mask? And it's actually a really high quality. It turned out really good, and I've had it for several years now. And most recently, because for some reason Splatterhouse has been rolling around in my head, I even painted the Terror mask itself. And it even goes beyond this. I created on the wallpaper engine on Steam a Splatterhouse Terror mask wallpaper that glows with one of the quotes. And you guys can find that on Steam if you looked it up under Splatterhouse in the wallpaper engines. And, you know, there you have it. I've just been low-key obsessed about this franchise ever since I first played it in the arcades and then later on consoles and finally the 2010 remake. I really don't know what it is that draws me to the Splatterhouse franchise. I think it's a mix of the power fantasy because like Doom and Doom Eternal, you are this giant raging beast of a man who is going against the denizens of hell with your bare fists. There are weapons in the game, but most of the time you're just punching and beating everything in your way, and it's very satisfactory to see them slamming into walls or being smashed into the floor. And every monster you kill has its own unique death animation, so you feel all the power behind the punches, and it's just insanely graphic. And back then I hadn't seen anything like that. I mean, by the time I saw the game, Mortal Kombat had come out, and while Mortal Kombat was extremely violent with realistic characters, it didn't hold a candle to the original Splatterhouse that just oozed, you know, guts and blood and organs and decapitations. And it was just something I had never seen before. And it just sucked me in. So with that said, you know, my personal history with the game, let's get into the game's storyline.
Who am I? Let's just say I'm God. You're God.
Like I said, when I first played it, I thought I was Jason Voorhees. It wasn't until much later where I discovered the real storyline, where you play a college student named Rick who goes to a mansion under the orders of his college professor, Dr. West, and you take your girlfriend with you, and while you guys are in the mansion, she gets kidnapped and you get fatally wounded. And while you're wounded, the Terror mask, which is this little guy right here, appears in front of you, and you know, you kind of put the mask on and you go from a scrawny little geek into this giant raging beast. And originally the mask is something of an evil character. It's helping you find your girlfriend, when in reality it's kind of collecting souls of all the creatures you're killing in order to resurrect this ancient evil. And there are two more games, Splatterhouse 2, Splatterhouse 3, where the stories are pretty similar. Something happens with your girl, you're forced to put the mask back on, and you have to rescue her. And the same goes for the 2010 remake, except the mask is made more of a anti-hero character instead of a secret villain, which we'll get to during that topic. But yeah, it's a classic slasher style horror game. Very straightforward storyline where the princess has been kidnapped and you must do everything in your power to rescue her. The big twist though is you eviscerate everything in your path, whereas, you know, Mario's always, oh yeah, I'm so cute, to just punch and jump and kick on Goombas and little, you know, happy stars appear. In this game, you're smashing skulls into the wall and crushing, you know, necks under your under your heel, and you're just tearing enemies apart, and it's insane.
Dr. Henry West, MD.
Doing some research, I discovered that obviously, first of all, the biggest inspirations for this game come from horror movies and also horror novels. first and foremost, obviously, is the Friday the 13th franchise, where it's no mistake that your character is modeled basically after Jason Voorhees. You have the blue jumpsuit, you're this giant muscular beast, and in the original games, you have the hockey mask, which by Splatterhouse 3 evolved into this more curved-like mask, as you can see here, that wraps around your face, and they kind of made it more alien-looking. They gave it higher cheekbones and a sharper curve on the skull to further differentiate it from, Jason Voorhees. But it also takes inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft. Dr. West is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator, which is Dr. Herbert West. Now, this is not the same West, obviously, but the name and the idea of wanting to resurrect the dead using unethical means is the Reanimator. And obviously, the names are the same. So we have H.P. Lovecraft, we have Jason Voorhees. You have a lot of monsters that you could say are come from other movies. You have creatures with chainsaw arms. You have, rabid wolves, zombies. You have these giant brain, like these alien-looking creatures, like giant insects, basically, with huge exposed brains, which are like a throwback to probably this island Earth with the brainiac monsters and stuff like that. So yeah, it took place. It takes inspiration from a lot of great horror literature and movies that were big at the time, and it definitely shows.
You're gonna have to learn to love the pain. There's a lot more of it to come.
Now we get to the meat of the matter. Like I said, this game is obscenely violent. Like, I don't know how this game went under the radar when it came to like Congress and the Senate and the media, because when Mortal Kombat came out, you also had Night Trap, and everyone just lost their minds over these two games. And oddly enough, every time I watch documentaries about the big ESRB rating board and all that being formed, no one brings up Splatterhouse, which I find very unusual. This game was so violent that when it came out on the TurboGrafx 16, it actually put a parental advisory on the box saying this game is not intended. It says, due to dark and extremely violent themes, this game is not intended or suitable for children. ... or cowards, which I love. They're just poking fun at the audience. So without, by law, having to, they put their own warning label on their box without, they weren't forced to. They just did it. So how violent was this game? Well, I still consider it one of the most violent games ever made. I'm not just talking about, Splatterhouse 1. I mean the franchise as a whole. Yes, we have Resident Evil and Mortal Kombat, and then we had games like Manhunt and Postal and Hatred, Agony. But there's something different about Splatterhouse, because where those games have violent elements to them, Splatterhouse is violent incarnate. There is not one moment in the game where something gruesome is not shown on screen. You'll be walking through a dungeon and you'll just see eviscerated bodies on the floor, their organs hanging out, giant pools of blood. There are people in jail cells who are rotting. Their arms are chained up. You see the bone, you see the muscle, the rib cages. Their eyes are hanging out. And every time you attack an enemy, they just don't fall over like they would in other brawlers. They explode in this gortastic mist of blood and violence. So your basic attack is punching or kicking. And when you punch a normal enemy, their rib cage bursts open. and their organs spill out all over their stomach, and then they fall over dead. Like, holy crap, that's your basic attack. Then, if you get the meat cleaver, every time you hit an enemy, their head flies off. I'm not just saying a little boink, boink, boink. I mean, it's like a baseball bat. Boom! Home run. You just see a severed head flying every single time you hit an enemy. Another enemy type is actually the putrid corpse of demons that are being hung by their necks from the ceiling or from trees. They just kind of like yo-yo down. So you're walking and these hung bodies just drop to attack you. And when you attack those guys, their stomachs burst and all their entrails just splash onto the floor. And that, you know, this is just the first game. The first level boss, if I remember correctly, is this giant room full of bloody, intestine-looking worms. And they're all slithering in the background. It's just this giant bloody mess of worm. And they jump out and you punch them. And of course they explode in a beautiful, you know, gory fashion. But later Splatterhouse games would push the envelope even further. I think it's Splatterhouse 2, where you have to kill demonic fetuses that hang from the ceiling on umbilical cords. And I think you even get to use a chainsaw against them. Like, holy crap. It's just, they just keep one-upping themselves on this grotesque imagery. And you think you've seen the worst the game has to offer, and then they throw something in front of you that goes even further, that goes beyond that. And that is something I've never understood on how it never reached the media sensation that Mortal Kombat was back in 1993. Because Mortal Kombat had, you know, head ripping, heart ripping, and a decapitation. This game was just everything you did. Their organs splashed everywhere. One of my favorites, actually, is when you get the 2x4, you hit them, and they fly into the background, and they just splat like a tomato against the wall. And depending on the type of enemy, it's either green blood or red blood, or they just completely like plaster and gray brain matter, just this big disgusting mess. I'm like, why does no one talk about this? Like, this was never brought up as far as I know. Hell, it was under the radar, and everyone gives credit to Mortal Kombat. I'm like, guys, you're killing demon babies in this game with a chainsaw. Holy crap.
I can help you. I can heal your wounds. We can save her if you show me some faith, if you trust me, if you put me on.
It didn't stay under the radar forever because in 2010, it was given a reboot. Namco released a new version of Splatterhouse using a third-party studio this time. And they, instead of being a 2D side-scroller, they made it a 3D brawler with a huge emphasis on the bloodshed. In fact, I think the blood is measured by gallons in this game. Because you use blood as your experience points, you use blood to heal yourself, you use blood as your special ability meter. Like, blood is your currency, blood is your life, and it's measured by gallons. Now, the 2010 reboot brought a lot of great changes to the table. First and foremost, they made it more cinematic. So they gave us a fully rendered opening movie where we see our main character, Rick, and his girlfriend get attacked, and we see him dying as the terror mask falls out of a sarcophagus and starts speaking to him. And it's basically saying, I'm your only chance at saving your girlfriend and surviving all of this madness. And it gives you this great quote where he goes, "All I need you to do is put a little faith in me, to believe in me, to put me on." And Rick puts the mask on and his bones shatter, his ribs burst, and he becomes that big hulking beast that we all know and love. What I absolutely love, and I cannot talk about this enough, is the fact that the Terror Mask is now voiced by Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings is a lot of our childhood. He's Winnie the Pooh, he's Tigger, he's Darkwing Duck, he's Don Carnage, he was Bonkers. You know, he is one of the big all-time voice actors for Disney. And he also played Goof Troop's Pete the Cat. And why I bring that up is because the Terror Mask is very similar to Pete's natural voice. So it's a low, growling type of voice. And it's so surreal hearing this Disney character dropping F-bombs, talking about naked women, encouraging murder, encouraging, ripping creatures' limbs off, being bloodthirsty, encouraging anger. And it's the whole experience. I'm just like, oh my God, this is Winnie the Pooh. This is the guy who played Winnie the Pooh telling me to rip a monster's head off and then cheering when I do. It's like, oh my God. So that's the first, those two are the first big changes. The game's more cinematic and they gave the Terror Mask a real voice. The next big change is the Terror Mask's purpose. In the original games, it was kind of manipulating everything to gain power, to kind of release itself to a degree. In this one, it's more of an anti-hero. We find out that it's actually an ancient blood god that was trapped in the mask, and it's basically wanting to get revenge on Dr. West, and it wants to resurrect this ancient evil to destroy it once and for all. And it's using Rick to gain that power to resurrect the evil so it could destroy the evil. It's basically one of those things like it brings it to life so the monster knows the Terror Mask is the one responsible for the monster's demise. It also legitimately kind of likes Rick. Like at first he's using Rick obviously to get, make its purpose known. But then it starts enjoying Rick's company in a sick little way. Like he acts like Rick's therapist. He keeps telling him don't bottle up your anger. Don't let people push you around. Don't let yourself get bullied. Fight back. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to feel emotions and fear and everything. Just don't let it, control you. But when you're pushed against the wall, fight back. Because Rick is he's not a coward, but he's kind of meek. So the mask is encouraging Rick to release all this pent-up anger and energy. And it's not a healthy relationship, but it's a better relationship than the original games. Finally, I had to bring up the violence again for the remake, because while the originals were just amazing with their violence, the remake went further because they started adding fatalities. And these fatalities, let me tell you, they were pretty nasty. You would put your hands in a monster's mouth and split them down the middle. You would rip them in half. You would tear their spines out. You'd beat them to death with their own limbs. The one of them I remember the most is you shove your fist up their backside and pull out their colon and then beat them to death with their own colon. You rip out organs, you rip out their hearts, the bloodshed just goes absurd levels. And then the life system It's no longer a meter, it's your actual body. The more damage you take, you start losing skin. So, like, you'll see your chest being skinned off, you'll see your muscle structures, and then you'll lose chunks of your arm, and you'll see bone, you'll see your beating heart. And it's just insane on the sheer amount of violence in this game. Unfortunately, it did not do well overall. Unfortunately, the remake suffered from a lot of problems. The development felt very rushed, and that resulted in a lot of glitches, an unpolished feel. There was a lot of audio problems. I mean, me, myself, personally, there were moments where the boss music was so loud that you could no longer hear what the two characters, Rick and the Terror Mask, were saying to one another. And that was really a problem because Terror Mask actually gives you tips on what to do next during a boss battle. Some gameplay elements just didn't feel polished or finished. I know there were some moments in the game where I was supposed to complete a puzzle by impaling a monster on a spike, and it just wouldn't trigger, so I would have to reset at the checkpoint. And it's a real shame that Splatterhouse, which started out so strongly, ended on such a mediocre note, because I always felt like this could be a franchise that could keep going throughout the different generations of consoles. But the mediocre sales, the glitches, the problems the game had, despite being a lot of fun, it still is one of my favorite PS3 games of all time. It just didn't do well enough to justify that sequel that could have fixed all those problems. Which makes me rather sad because I really loved listening to Jim Cummings as the Terror Mask. I mean, that's the best part of the whole game. The combat's pretty fun. The blood, the violence, that's all super fun. But just having Jim Cummings as this demonic entity encouraging you to be bad and murderous and extracting revenge, that was the best part. And it saddens me that he will not be coming back anytime soon to play that character. Luckily, though, if you can find the Splatterhouse on PS3, I believe it's super cheap these days. If you beat the campaign, which is maybe 6-7 hours, you unlock the uncensored versions of Splatterhouse 1, 2, and 3. So that's really cool because I know the console versions of at least the first two had content cut and was censored. Some of the blood wasn't there, some of the weapons were not included, some of the bosses were changed. But if you can get your hands on the PS3 version and quickly rush through the campaign, you can get all three of the original arcade games uncensored right there on disc. And that's cool. It also lets you unlock other masks. So you can get the classic mask, you can get the red mask, the Splatterhouse 3 mask that wraps around the head. So that's really cool too. And it had a kick-ass metal soundtrack, death metal soundtrack from various artists. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we'll ever be getting a new Splatterhouse. If we are, if I find out one day, we will get a new Splatterhouse. Trust me, I will be talking about it here on a small table. But there you have it. I just wanted to share a little bit of my passion of this dead franchise that's hopefully more people than I think remember. And it was just, I noticed that the anniversary was coming up and I wanted to make a fun little video and remind everybody that this franchise exists. So what I'd like you to do is tell me what your favorite Splatterhouse game was. Tell me your favorite moment, your favorite weapon, your favorite boss. Just tell me what you do enjoy or don't enjoy about the Splatterhouse franchise, okay? I always read the comments even though people tell me I shouldn't. So leave a comment below, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Small Table. I am Mazer. This is Chewy, and we will see you next time. Bye. Mwah. Bye.